60 Minutes Rewind.
With a single shot, 298 men, women, and children were massacred in Ukraine. The dead were traveling from Amsterdam to Malaysia when an anti-aircraft missile shredded their wide-body airliner. That was 6 years ago, and no one has been held accountable. The downing of Malaysia Flight 17 was a shock to the world. How could innocent civilians leaving the Netherlands on vacation to Asia lose their lives in a war Russia started with Ukraine? After a years-long investigation, Dutch prosecutors say they know who is responsible. This is the story of the hunt for the suspects, now charged with 298 counts of murder. In a Dutch hangar, heavy with the smell of fuel and fire, Malaysia Flight 17 has been resurrected from 8,000 fragments. The Boeing 777, 20 feet wide and 200 feet long, was torn by an estimated 800 pieces of shrapnel, each the size of a bullet. A warhead detonated 10 feet to the left of Captain Eugene Chu's windscreen. The Dutch Safety Board says the greatest density of holes, 102, is through his window. Shrapnel tore through the cockpit and out the other side. The cockpit sheared away, and the rest of the plane flew another minute and a half. Passengers were thrashed by explosive decompression and a 500-mile-an-hour wind at 40 degrees below zero. One passenger was found wearing his oxygen mask.
I want to know who killed my children.
It was July 17, 2014, that Samira Kaler walked her boys, 19-year-old Shaka and 11-year-old Miguel, as far as Amsterdam airport security would let her. The youngest boy was worried.
He hugged me really tight, and he told me, like, "Mom, I'm so afraid to take this plane. I'm so afraid. What happened when the airplane will crash?" I told him, "Miguel, come on, you've been on flights many times. You are with Shaka. Everything is going just to be fine." He said, "You promise me?" I said, "I promise everything will be okay."
The brothers were going to see their grandmother in Bali. Samira planned to come back to the airport the very next day because her middle son, Mika, couldn't get a seat on Flight 17.
So I never got a proper goodbye, said a proper goodbye, and that really is something that I have to deal with for the rest of my life.
I cannot forgive myself that I promised my baby Miguel that everything will be fine. Who am I to tell him that everything is going to be okay?
That's what a son wants to hear from his mother.
Yeah.
But I feel like I lied to him. Who am I to give him that guarantee? It's been like hell. I feel emptiness. I feel sadness. There is a hole in my heart. It will always hurt, and I miss them every day.
Her boys were among 193 Dutch citizens on board.
It's 9/11 for the Netherlands. All people in the Netherlands were very, very, very shocked.
Shrines in Dutch homes are common, including the one to Piet Ploeg's brother, sister-in-law, and nephew. His nieces didn't go on their family vacation.
You had to tell your nieces what happened.
I don't want to think too much about that moment. It's too emotional for me. I saw my nieces falling in each other's arms when they realized their parents and their brother were dead. And it was a terrible, terrible moment. Yeah.
No one had any understanding that they were going to be flying over a war zone.
Oh, you didn't think about it. And after MH17, we always think about it.
Flight 17 was 3 hours into a 12-hour route when it came within range of a war. In 2014, Russia dismembered its neighbor to the west. It annexed part of Ukraine. And today, pro-Russian militias supplied and manned by Moscow are fighting to control eastern Ukraine. In the days before the Flight 17 murders, 2 Ukrainian military planes were shot down. But despite that, the day Flight 17 entered the airspace, 160 airliners crossed over Ukraine. It was cloudy. Flight 17 at 33,000 feet appeared only on radar until it fell through the clouds across 20 square miles.
We consider it a national crisis because if you think, it was not only that we were doing a criminal investigation, but the most important thing in the beginning was the recovery mission.
Andy Krok is lead investigator for the Netherlands.
First, we needed to recover all the casualties to get them back home so that the next of kin could mourn. Actually, we were in national mourning.
In a nation so small, it seemed everyone knew someone touched by the murders. For days, convoys of hearses stretching beyond sight were met by gauntlets of grief. Fred Vesterbeke is the chief prosecutor who's been on the case from the start.
Have all of the remains been identified?
We were able to identify from the 298 casualties, 296. So for 2 people, we didn't find any remains.
With no admission of guilt, 350 investigators from 5 countries began almost 6 years of work.
We started with multiple scenarios in the beginning. One was it an accident that could be discarded quite quickly? The other one, was it an explosion from inside? And the last 2, most importantly, was it air-to-air? Like, was it shot by a plane or was it surface-to-air?
Those scenarios narrowed quickly because of a technique new to the police: civilian internet investigators. Just days before the murders, Elliot Higgins started a UK-based group of online detectives that he calls Bellingcat, named for a fable of mice tying a bell to a cat to warn of danger. Higgins found images crowdsourced online.
So this is one of the first videos that was shared online after MH17 was shot down, and it was shared claiming that this was a Buk missile launcher.
And how do you know across all these images that you're looking at the same convoy?
So there's certain details that kind of leap out at us. There's the white truck, but you can see there's a black exhaust pipe on the side of that truck. It's a very small detail, but it does help us show that it's very similar to the truck that's in other photographs and videos. You can also see
Matching randomly sourced pictures with geolocation techniques, Higgins and his colleagues spotted an anti-aircraft system in the right place on the right day. Images that had been shot earlier led him to the convoy's starting point.
And that took us back to a town called Kursk. And in Kursk, there's a missile brigade called the 53rd Air Defense Brigade, and we were able to establish for certain the missile launcher came from that particular brigade.
And Kursk is in Russia, and the 53rd Brigade is a Russian military unit.
Yes, and it was probably very likely crewed by Russian crew.
Higgins also discovered the missile system retreating after the shootdown, with one incriminating difference.
You're saying that there's a missile missing from this picture?
That's right. So there's one there, and there's one just out the back of there as well. But there should be a missile between these 2 missiles.
It wasn't long before Elliot Higgins got a call from Dutch investigators.
How important was the information that came from Bellingcat?
That was pretty groundbreaking at that time. So we've learned a lot from them as well. But that's just one layer of the evidence, because we have to build up evidence that can stand in court. We also have the witnesses, forensic evidence, etc.
The investigators told us layers of evidence came from the weapon itself. Its missile warhead is packed with a unique bow-tie-shaped shrapnel. This signature shrapnel was found in the bodies of the flight crew. Another layer of evidence came in thousands of phone calls intercepted among Russians and their allies.
Только что
We have just shot down a plane, a rebel commander said, before realizing the catastrophic mistake. Yet another layer of evidence was supplied by Ukrainian villagers.
You have eyewitnesses to the missile launch, is that correct? More than one?
I'd say I have an eyewitness, and how many, I didn't say how many.
What military unit did the missile system come from?
From the 53rd Brigade of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation.
Is there any room for doubt in that?
No, there's no doubt at all.
The story will continue after this.
They don't know who pushed the button, but this past summer, Dutch prosecutors charged 3 Russians and a Ukrainian with 298 counts of murder. Sergei Dubinsky was head of intelligence for the pro-Russia rebels in Ukraine. Prosecutors say Oleg Pulatov and Leonid Karchenko were involved in delivering the missile system. The highest-ranking Russian accused is Igor Girkin, a retired colonel in Russian intelligence. He was in charge of the pro-Russia militia in Ukraine. We found him in Moscow, living under the protection of the Russian government. He told us, someone has to be the scapegoat, so they picked me and others who couldn't even theoretically shoot down this plane. The militia did not bring down the Boeing plane. I have no other comment.
How helpful have the Russians been in this investigation over the last 5 years?
Well, I'd say they haven't been helpful at all, because what they should have done is give us all the information and all the proof we needed in this difficult investigation. They should have told us that at the second day after it happened. They should have told us we made a mistake or we did something which shouldn't have happened, and they should have come forward. That is what they should have done, and they never did.
Still unhelpful, the Russians will not extradite the defendants.
If they're convicted, even though they're not in the courtroom, is that enough for you?
No.
Everybody will be haunted by the fact that they're still out there and not in custody.
The trial is scheduled to begin March 9th and will be heard by a panel of 3 Dutch judges. Samira Kaler told us she will not attend. Piet Ploeg will not miss it.
The families have the right to speak in court, and I wonder what you intend to say.
I want them to know what they have done, and what they have done to not only to the victims, but also the next of kin. They have to feel it.
Prosecutors told us their investigation is continuing beyond the trial. They hope to charge additional suspects. For its part, Russia has spun any number of stories about what might have killed 298 innocent victims, stories that so far have not withstood the evidence presented by the silent witness of Malaysia Flight 17.